we just talk.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, you got to realize, you know, this is the end of the week. I ain't shaved in several days. So.
Well, I'm a scruff too. This is for my education.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay.
So, tell me about how. Let's start off with how you became involved with Fisher.
I've got a double engineering degree. I like engineering.
Mm-hmm.
I worked several jobs I didn't like. I got caught in a layoff. What was that? 81 maybe, 81, 82,
Yeah,
something
there.
like that. And I came home one day and I told my wife, I said, you know, I've been laid off and I'm tired of working. I want to start an airplane business. And she flipped out. And of course, we didn't have the internet. It was a little more difficult than it is now. But I began to look at all the different manufacturers. My dad had a plane when I was a kid, so I grew up with planes, and Dad and I both flew models too. So I began to look for something that I was comfortable building,
Mm-hmm.
that looked like it would fly good. We went around, I took him with me part of the time, went around pretty much all over the country and looked at what was available then. And it was the very beginning of the ultralight movement.
Right.
We had already bought a Laser.
Yes.
And had it
Out of Canada.
Out of Canada.
Yep.
Serial number
I
12.
got serial number 12 with a Laser, so we
Wow.
got into it early.
Yeah.
Mike Fisher was the one that after I went and visited him and looked at his products and all that, convinced me that this is the one I ought to have.
What about the product was the thing
was-
that convinced you?
It looked like an airplane. It looked like it flew like an airplane, and it was made out of wood.
Okay.
I wanted something that I was comfortable and easy to work with. I've told people, we used to do forums and stuff around here, and I've told people, I can teach you to make a glue joint a whole lot faster than somebody can teach you to weld.
Right.
You want to build your own airplane, I can send you a bunch of sticks, and it won't be long, you'll be building an airplane.
So what was the first airplane that you built?
I bought two 202s and a 101. At that time, they were $1,900 for the whole package, engine included. That's everything but instruments and paint.
Wow.
I bought 3 of them. That's what you had to do to get it, be a dealer.
Okay.
I went home and immediately started building.
Mm-hmm.
90 days from the time I left Mike's factory, my 202 was in the air.
Wow.
Had a Kawasaki 440
Mm-hmm.
with his reduction unit. First solo flight, motor mount started breaking, belt started flying. My first solo landed was dead stick.
How did it glide?
Fine. Didn't have a bit of trouble.
What do you
And
think
that's
the
a-
glide ratio was on that?
9 to 1.
8 or 9 to
They
1. Yeah,
advertise 9.
9's what they always advertise. 8 might be a little
Mhm.
closer. Depends on how heavy it is. And the old Kawasaki was a little heavier than
Right.
we eventually went to the Rotax. It was uneventful enough. I was at the airport and there was a lot of people out there to see the flight. One of them was a CFI, and he was hard of hearing. And when I called for the truck to come tow me back to the hangar, and I didn't land very far from the hangar, he wanted to know why. Propeller was still turning when I landed because the belts had just come off and the
Sure.
prop was free with it. And he told me, he said, if you need a license, he said, I'll sign it off anytime you get ready. He said, I couldn't tell you didn't have an engine running. So
That's good.
eventually, I wound up putting a 277 in that airplane. I flew it quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Wound up putting a 277 in it. Took it
We-
in and out of places I shouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
Did a lot of things in the early days that I shouldn't have. Got by with most of them.
Mhm.
Tore a few airplanes up. Nice thing about the wooden ones, I take it home, fix it.
Glue it up.
Yeah. But that was how I got started in it. I took that airplane to Sun and Fun the first year I had it. Mike Fisher's then test pilot, his name was Gene Head, who's not around anymore, was a little bit intimidated by the planes. He was a corporate pilot, was used to flying twins and stuff, and those little light airplanes kind of scared him, I think. And Mike knew it already, and Mike came to me at the first show after he saw me fly the plane. He said, I need a demo pilot for the shows, and if we've got new products, may need a test pilot. Are you interested? from that point, I've made 6, 7, 8 trips a summer each year to the factory.
Mm-hmm.
He set up a factory in South Africa.
South Africa.
Built and ready to fly 202s with 277s on them. And he would get a crate of them in, and I'd go up there and we'd put them all together, and I'd test fly them and sign off the logbooks. Gene was doing that before I got involved, and I've got one of the ones that Gene signed off. The one that I have now, I didn't even get to sign off, but I did sign off. I don't remember how many now. I think they came in crates of 6. We probably did 18 or 24 of them that I signed off.
How many total do you think they made in South Africa?
I don't know. Mike was always kind of close with his business end of it, and I wasn't interested in it.
What was his contact with? What was his connection with South Africa?
Cheap labor.
Cheap labor.
He went over there and found a bunch of people that would work cheap. And I really don't know any of the details other than he had brochures and stuff. You know, I may at the house have some of the old brochures from back then even.
Interesting to see.
I threw a bunch of that stuff away not long ago, but there may still be some of it. He had pictures of an uncovered airplane with, 25 people sitting on the wing. You know.
Really?
To show the strength.
That'd be interesting to see. Yeah.
Just stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I don't remember what the exact price. It was cheap, though. It was less than $3,000 ready to fly. As they began to develop new products, I helped build some of them. I didn't do any of the design work, but I did help build some of the stuff. And there were people that were involved in that a lot of people never knew about.
Right.
We were talking the other day, there was one named John Smith that I had even forgotten about, Peggy asked me about, that had designed an airplane, and Mike made a deal with him. He would kit his airplane if he would build a different one for him. And John and I built the 505. I built the wings, he built the fuselage, and it was his design. They called it the Skeeter. And for that, John built the 404, which I then got a hold of and did all the flight test work on.
John designed the 404.
No, John built it for him. I don't know. John may have had some design input on it, but I don't know who did it. Mike was real good to get other people
to do stuff.
To do a lot of things for him, especially in the design parameters. Now he would put his input into it too, but he didn't sit down and come up 100% on his own with a lot of stuff. Sure. But several of the airplanes. Now Steve Lambert was over here last night, and he had a lot to do with the Super Koala and the Classic. Mm-hmm. And basically took a Koala and made a two-place out of it, took a 404 and made a two-place out of it.
Yeah. And a lot of the literature shows the two of them together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kind of thing, lighter than heavier.
Yeah. Well, at that time, there was no such thing as a two-seat ultralight. It never has been really in the United States. But they built it for training purposes, and they called them ultralight training vehicles was what they were called. Right. I got set up as an instructor. When we first got started, the USUA, United States Ultralight Association, had a training program, and I got involved in that. Back then, we trained with a radio and a headset and said, give it a little more throttle.
Right.
Hop it up, now throttle back and land, and you hop them down the runway. Trained out of single places until we could get the two places going. Mm-hmm. Then I went to the ASC, because USUA kind of devolved, I guess. ASC had a program. I was an instructor with them. I actually had a number with them that I could transfer from plane to plane to plane, so that I didn't have to re-register everything. Sure. That was just the way they did it. And I would transfer that to whatever I was training out of at the time. And I trained a few people. I was not the one that was doing 100 people a year or anything like that, but probably over the years, 25, maybe 30 people, something like that.
But in our location, there's not a lot of activity.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, people would come. I had several people that came out of state because there just wasn't a lot
and they knew
of training.
Sure.
And I had one guy, I never did teach him to fly. I wound up buying the airplane back from him.
They're always something like that.
And you did go to people sometimes.
Yeah.
You travel.
Well, I guess the farthest I ever went to help somebody with one was Idaho. I went and spent a week in Idaho one time to help
You
a
hired
guy.
Mike to come up there and build.
So let's start, like, what's your experience with, we can kind of go through some experiences with each of the individual aircraft. Starting, I guess, at the bottom, 101. I still get some calls, from people that want information, want to rebuild. They have a 101, they want to fly it. What was it based on, and what was the history?
Jerry Ritz, of Ritz Propellers, had an idea for building using geodetics.
Mm-hmm.
And he and Mike got together and they built basically this 101 design. It was a 36-foot wingspan. It had a built-up spar, a geodetic built-up spar. And it was never a real popular airplane. When he came out with the 202, there were some upgrades, like the spar had the plywood web instead of the geodetics and things like that. And a lot of us that built a 101 used the 202 spar instead of the geodetic one.
It just didn't look strong enough.
The first one I built was a 202. Then I built the 101, and I built it at 26 feet instead of 36.
Mm-hmm.
Put a little bigger engine in it.
Mm-hmm.
I put
and you did did you do the plywood spar?
Did the plywood spar. I put a 202 cowling on it instead of a 101 cowling on it. I made 2 or 3 little changes in it. And I put that Cuyuna.
Right, Cuyuna?
I put a Rotax gearbox on a Cuyuna. Made an adapter and put it on there. And it was quite a peppy little airplane.
Mm-hmm.
When the 404 came out, that was the first one that Mike asked me to really do a flight test program on it. Gene just didn't want to fly it. He was afraid of the airfoil on it. The airfoil is basically an old T-craft.
This is Gene, the test pilot guy?
Gene Head, the test pilot man.
Okay, not Gene, the other Gene.
No, this was long before Gene
Darling.
Hansen was in there.
Okay.
And I wound up actually taking it back home with me to do it. Peggy even bought me an hour's duel with Marion Cole to go do some aerobatics just in case I got into something I didn't know how to get out of.
Right, that's smart.
And that was always something I was happy with in my logbook.
Mm-hmm.
At that time I had a logbook, but I didn't have a license. But we did that. We did the 505. We did the 606. We did the Classic. We did the Super Koala. And then Gene and Darlene bought the company.
Now, they were dealers, too.
Her husband, Ervil Jackson, was a dealer, and he wanted the company.
He just wanted it because he wanted it, or...?
He wanted to buy the company.
Okay.
I don't know a lot of the details about why Mike wanted to get rid of it.
So there was a deal where they were trying to buy the company.
He was trying to buy the company. He came down with cancer and eventually died before they could seal the deal.
Right.
And Darlene bought it anyway. She said, Ervil wanted this. I'm going to go through with it. Ervil had already hired people to run.
Because he was running Jackson Manufacturing.
Which was farm equipment, basically.
Right. Welding and stuff like that. Yeah.
So she bought that. The transition there for a short period of time. I got involved in transferring airplanes and all kinds of stuff. Back then I had another motorhome. I had an older one. But I went up to the factory and went to the factory in Ohio.
In Ohio.
I had one of the factory airplanes. Let's see, I had the 505, I believe it was. The prototype 505 was at my house, and I took it back to Mike because he had sold it to somebody else when he sold the company. He had the plane sold. That thing wound up in Florida, didn't it? Anyway, I went from El Dorado to his house and dropped one off and picked up the Classic and took it to North Dakota and delivered it to Gene and Darlene. Spent a little bit of time with them flying the airplane and just getting them comfortable with it. And doing some of this kind of stuff, talking to them about the company and things. Gene was involved with the company. He and Darlene were not married at the time.
Right.
But there was another guy named Joe, and I don't remember his last name, that was going to be marketing, that she had hired.
Right. So they saw the potential for, this was the kind of the ultralight boom time.
It was. This was,
there was a lot of demand
89 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the exact year. In the late 80s.
89, yeah.
And one year, they came and Mike came during that transition. We actually had two identical airplanes here that year. That had the 606. They were both painted alike. Gene was flying one of them, and I was flying one of them. I was breaking some of the rules a little bit, and Gene got accused of it. And Gene was standing there telling him he didn't do it. And they were telling him, we saw you do it. They got it all settled and took off, and came around, and they stopped him again and accused him again. He said, I'm telling you, I didn't do it. The third time they stopped him while they were talking to him, I came around in the other airplane. And it was only then that they believed him that he didn't do it. So, that's just one of those little knickknacks that was funny back in that day.
Yeah.
A little more Wild West back then.
It was.
Yeah.
During the transition, Mike started building some planes with four-stroke engines in them. I got involved in that a little bit, did a couple of the tests for him, and then Gene and them told me, said, if you're going to work for us, you're not going to work for them. So I had to go one or the other, yeah. Over the years, when even after Gene and Darlene got a hold of it, if they needed a plane delivered somewhere that was inconvenient for them, I would drive 1,200 miles from my house to their place and pick it up and deliver it. There was a couple of those. I delivered one of them over close to Mike from
And tell
North
him how
Dakota.
many planes you built.
Built 22. I'm working on the 23rd one. I hadn't finished it yet, and I hadn't worked on it in a while either, for that matter. And I've got 5 or 6 that aren't finished right now. Just I tend to accumulate these things. One of them was actually given back to me. The man said, I'm not ever going to, he had a stroke. And he said, I'm not ever going to get to fly it. I'm not going to get to finish it. And I told him, I said, I don't have the money to buy it. It's a Dakota Hawk with a 912. And he said, that's not a problem. He said, you finish it, you fly it, you use it, whatever. When I'm gone, if you sell it, you can give my estate whatever they don't owe you for finishing it. But I've done that for 4 or 5 different people, just finish their product up. I did get the old original serial number 1 classic here a few years ago and got to restore it. And the guy wanted to restore it just like it was when it was new. And it was for sale again here a while back. Interesting story about him. He wanted an estimate, obviously. I gave him an estimate. Took a lot longer than I expected. You know how that goes. Man came to pick it up, and I told him, I said, I made you a price. I'm going to honor it. But I gave him a log of my work. And he said, well, I see quite a bit more work here than what we talked about. I said, yeah, that's the way it is, but that's part of life. About 3 years later, one day in the mail, I got this note, and it said, I've been feeling bad about that ever since it happened. Here's $1,500 more. So he was happy with what he got,
Sure.
and that's the reason I tell that story.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
If you make your customer happy, like you say, he is the best salesman you got.
Yeah.
I've discovered over the years that sometimes it would be 2, 3, 4 years down the road, and somebody would come to me and say, I saw your airplane at North Little Rock at a show 4 years ago, and I decided right then I wanted one. I've been saving my money. The factory wouldn't do it. But I had a dealer finance program for a while where I would buy the kit and the person would put down whatever they could and they would pay on it and I kept it until they got it paid off and then I delivered it to them.
Right.
But I'd guaranteed to hold that price.
Yeah.
We did that for a number of years.
Yeah.
A few people took me up on it. Not a whole lot, but a few did.
So you basically worked at this as your business.
It was it. When I got laid off on that job for 11 years, we did this full time. We did air shows.
And you had your little routine.
Had a little routine. I've got at that time, there was 2 routines I did. One of them was in a 303, which was just the old drunk farmer act.
Oh, yeah.
While somebody was flying, I had on a pair of coveralls and put my hat on crooked and acted drunk and got up on the podium, you know, and made a fool out of myself, and the police would come haul me off, and pretty soon I'd be back up there. And, I would tell them that I wanted to fly in the show. Hey, I want to fly. What do we do to fly in the show? There's an airplane for sale. All right, I'll be back. I'm going to go get this airplane, you know. And wherever it was parked, I'd have it sitting in a set of chocks, and I'd crank that thing up and get in it. And as soon as the other guy landed, I didn't go out to the runway and take off. I'd take off through a ditch or just wherever it was and do the old drunk act.
Mike's always been very comfortable with those planes.
Yes, yes.
I mean, literally drag the wing on the ground.
He knows what they do. You can do it with them.
The other one had a 202, and we would go to a show and we'd say, we've got a big model airplane we want to test fly. We've got to have some ballast for it. It won't have the CG just right. I need 165 pounds of ballast. I actually had a guy come driving up with a pickup truck at the show down in Louisiana, batteries in it. He said, I got 150 pounds of them here. Is that enough?
He really wanted to help.
But I would volunteer to be the ballast.
Be the ballast.
And I would just usually pick somebody from the air show there that I knew that had gotten me involved in coming to the show. And I had a set of lines made up that were 250 foot long. They were just black cotton string with a piece of black bungee rubber in the middle of them so I could get a little stretch. And I had taken caution ribbon and tied it every 15 or 20 feet. So you could see there was really something between him and the airplane. And they would take me out and they'd put me in the airplane and they'd buckle me down.
Like they were going to do a control line.
Control line airplane. And one man would get back and hold the tail and one would get out in front of it, flip the prop. And I had electric start on it. I'd hit the starter when he flipped it, you know, and he'd step back. And he'd go out and pick the handle up and he'd check that thing and wave it off. And I could take that airplane off in a 500-foot diameter circle and circle him. Well, the first time I come around into the wind, the lines just ran through a little hole and were wrapped around my finger, and I'd turn them loose. And of course, the plane then was
and the
loose.
Announcer would say, "Oh, it's loose."
And now, if you had a good announcer, you know that's really the show.
All right.
And it can only last about 4.5 or 5 minutes. After that, the crowd figures
it out.
They get it out, yeah. But you can scare the bejesus out of some people. Up in North Little Rock, there was a big ravine, and I would take off and go across the runway and drop down in this ravine, and it'd be outside.
Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden you pop up again?
I'd go all the way down the runway to pop up, and people would already be out the runway, and the announcer was trying to get them to come back, you know. And Peggy's got a video that was taken off the top of the motorhome, and you couldn't see me from up on top of the motorhome. Just things like that.
If you get an opportunity to send up some of that videotape to me, I'd love to get it copied. And, and you know, I mean,
I've
probably still got enough stuff to copy it.
I'll look for that picture too with those people sitting on the wing.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I think I know where there's one of those brochures left. I was cleaning my shop out the other day, and I threw a whole bunch of that kind of stuff away.
So
anyway,
so 202.
I've built 12 or 13 of those. In 1991, I had one of them. It was Reserve Grand Champion here.
And it was just, it was basically a better version or more popular version of the 101?
It was. It was a little bit beefier, and it looked like a Cub. Mm-hmm. Everybody loves a Cub.
Yeah.
Wayne Ison had been involved with Mike sometime in the past, and he had this little low-wing design he wanted to call the Minimax. And Mike did what eventually became the 303. And Mike didn't want to call it the Minimax. He wanted to call it the FP303. So Wayne Ison then went and did the Minimax.
I see. So they're very they're clones of each other almost.
Well, the construction's quite a bit different. I don't know how familiar you are with Team, but they use compression members and anti-drag wires and stuff like that as opposed to using geodetics.
Right. So basically Mike did a geodetic version of that design.
Yes.
They look a lot alike.
They look very similar.
How did that go between him and Wayne?
Eventually, they got over it,
I see.
Wayne and I always got along real well. One of the things that I've always tried to do was be helpful with the competitors, and it kind of stemmed from the model airplanes. We'd go to contests and stuff. We'll loan each other an airplane to fly again. I've loaned people planes, and they beat me in the contest with my plane, stuff like that.
Sure.
But I always managed to get along with pretty much all the competition, and I think it helped him a lot that that I could be the grease,
sure.
between the friction.
You seem to be the common denominator in a lot of this.
Yeah.
Well, he's got a good attitude, and everybody likes Mike.
But we went from there to from the 202 to the 303. Then the deal with the 404 and 505, they kind of came along together. And then Steve did the Super Koala first, and then the Classic. Let's see. Steve Lambert.
Steve Lambert.
And Steve's not involved in it anymore.
So Wayne was only involved
in the 303.
In the 303. That was the only. Okay.
Yeah, and then they split up.
I think he might have had something to do with the 202 early on.
So
but
Steve
not
Lambert
much.
came in with Gene and Darlene to do design work for them.
Yes. Steve was a dealer for Mike.
Right.
And then after Gene and Darlene took the place, they hired Steve on a full-time basis for a short time.
Okay.
And he did the Dakota Hawk. He was probably the main character in the Dakota Hawk.
The Dakota Hawk.
And then they decided to do the Tiger Moth, and he got involved in doing some redesign. The way the story was always told to me, they were going to build an 80% Tiger Moth, and they got this engineer, and he started building it. And Steve walked in and said, "Has anybody tried to sit in this fuselage? Where are you going to get an 80% person?"
Right.
And they had to then redesign the fuselage big enough for somebody to get in.
Where did all this steel fuselage stuff come from?
For some reason, and I think a lot of people had hit Mike up about, how come it's always wood? How come you don't do anything out of steel? Mike did a steel tube version of the Super Koala. Well, first he did the Koala. And he put a 4-stroke engine in it. Rotax had a 2-cylinder 4-stroke that was never produced. Mike got one of the prototypes. We flew it a little bit. And I really don't know all the story behind what happened there other than it did ever get produced. And he put out 2, maybe 3 of those kits. There was a guy out in California named Bob. Help me.
He calls us all the time.
Sasser. Bob Sasser. That's got one of them, been working on it for 25 years. Won't ever finish it. He told me the other day, last time I talked to him, he'll call me about once every 5 or 6 weeks. How's the weather down there? How you doing?
Yeah.
He even drove out to my place one time to meet me because I had talked to him on the phone. I didn't sell him the kit, but he would call and ask questions and call. Well,
that's what people do.
Mike had put my number on a lot of stuff, and if somebody had a question, they couldn't get it answered
from
to their satisfaction at the time of day or whatever.
Yeah.
I was getting calls.
He wouldn't answer questions after closing at 5.
Yeah.
And Mike would answer 8, 9, or 10 o'clock at night.
And then he did a steel tube version of the Super Koala. Interesting story about it. Probably ought not to be on tape. He built it with a 503. I flew it a little bit. Wasn't bad. He showed up at Lakeland with it. He had taken the 503 out and put a 532 in it. Didn't do a weight and balance.
No.
I don't know how much he'd run the engine. I took off, got about halfway around the pattern, and quit. I recranked it and quit. I recranked it and quit. I could get it to run kind of in mid-range. I got it back around and I went to flare to land, and it was so nose heavy it wouldn't flare. Punched that throttle and made a nice landing with it. No sweat. Mike said, "Fly it again. I'm going to go get some stuff for weight." The second time it wouldn't start. And that's when it came in and pancaked and ripped the gear out from under it. Flopped over on its back right in the middle of the runway down at Sun and Fun in front of everybody in the world. Had end numbers on it, and I wasn't a pilot. I didn't have a license. Wasn't even signed off for solo on that airplane.
And the hours weren't on the plane.
Nothing. We got that plane apart in the back of the hangar before anybody showed up.
Y'all were younger, you moved faster.
We were moving fast.
I guess so.
Yeah, anyway, that's one of those funny stories.
I won't put that one on the web.
Then Gene and Darlene, like you say, they did the Dakota Hawk and the Tiger Moth. The Tiger Moth, Gene is about the only one that's ever flown it. I flew it here one time, but Gene did all the test work that has been done on it himself. And they built two of them. One of them had a rotary engine in it, the Norton, and the one he's got now has got a loam.
Right. Which is a heavy engine.
It's a very heavy engine. And the one with the loam is steel tube.
Right.
But the steel tubes just never were very popular.
Not because of any kind of flight characteristic or any kind of...
I couldn't tell much difference between the Super Koala in the wood and the metal, except that there was a metal brace that went right across the top of the cockpit that my head kept bumping on.
Oh, all right.
But as far as flight characteristics, I couldn't tell any difference. And the weight was not a whole lot of difference. The steel tube 202, because it had a 4-stroke engine instead of a 2-stroke, it flew a little different, but the flight characteristics of the plane weren't so much different. It was just the power plant.
Right.
And I've never flown the steel tube with a 2-stroke in it. The 202, we did a Mosler version one time. Gene did.
Which means?
It had a Mosler engine in it,
okay.
the little half VW derivative. And I flew it, and it flew okay, but it didn't have any get off the ground spunk.
Okay.
It flew great in the air, but it just didn't have any,
the power to get it off the ground.
No static thrust on takeoff.
Right.
And we found the same thing with the Dakota Hawk. They put a 4-cylinder Mosler, which was supposedly 80 horsepower, but it ran the same prop as the 277. Ran a 60-28 prop. And it flew great in the air. But I could not take a passenger out of, well, I took one out of Lakeland, and I told Gene, I said, that's the last one out of here. We'll have to go somewhere, go to South Lakeland or whatever to take them up. When they put that 912 in it, it changed that airplane dramatically. It'll go out of here and make 300 feet at the end of the runway with 2 people. So that was a real good combination with it. I have flown one with the Continental 85 in it. It's heavier. Made the airplane a little more sluggish. Flew fine. It just didn't perform like a 912.
Right.
But
So
that's been, and I never flew Tom Morris's airplane.
No. I've been in it. I've flown in it with the fellow that was with Art.
Pilot,
Art, yeah. He's a good guy.
Yeah.
Flew it well.
Well, and I'm sure he was used to it. And he probably did a much better job than I would have done.
I know that he flew. He flew all the hours on it pretty much. I mean, Paul never flew it hardly at all.
Yeah.
So. Let's talk about the Dakota Hawk a little bit more. It seems to be one of the more popular models. Aside from these two types of engines, have you any experience with seeing it flying with an O200 or the C65?
I've not seen it fly with a 65.
Or because I get a lot.
Tom's got a 200 or 235 in it. Oh, 235.
Which one?
Tom Morrison.
He's got.
Or is his an 85?
He's got a C90 in it.
C90, okay. Now Ron Sipes had a 85, I believe it was, in his.
And so the aircraft is really suited for an 80 to 90 horsepower engine.
Yeah. What I found with the Mosler, I could get the higher speed out of the Mosler because it was turning a little more RPM, I guess, was probably the big deal. I found that I could squeeze about 130 miles an hour out of it, which Gene and them didn't really want me to do. But nice, comfortable cruise, somewhere in the 90 to 100 mile an hour range. It'll slow down to 60 or 65 and fly just real nice if it's light.
Right. And so coming, and the flight characteristics and the pattern?
I'm afraid I'm not real good about numbers on that because I don't really pay attention to the airspeed. In fact, I was flying that thing yesterday, and the third flight I realized the airspeed wasn't working.
Okay.
But approach, probably 55 without flaps, 50 with flaps, and I discovered that I could cross control that airplane and fly it in a pattern with ultralights at 35 miles an hour by running about 5,000 or 5,500 RPM. Quite a bit of cross control and holding the nose up like it was slipping but not let it fall.
Right.
And could just crank it around and fly it along like sideways. That. The reason I wanted sideways is so I could see what everybody else was doing. If I've got the nose up and the flaps down, I can't see anything that's around me. And when you're flying in a pattern like out here, they talk about being busy out here when they've got 10 planes in the pattern. I've flown out here when there's 45 planes in the pattern.
Wow.
And they wanted us 500 feet apart, and if you were 200 feet apart, y'all were the ones that were way apart.
Right.
It's just not like that anymore. We just don't have the planes that are here. But the plane was just so controllable. It just felt like you were wearing it. And some of that was the fact I had a lot of time in it. I've flown with people that flew Cubs like that.
Yes. Yeah, put it on like a coat.
Yeah, and they can get in with that. I've had them do it with a koala.
My first girlfriend's father was very good at controlling his Cub, and he would slip it between two trees coming in on final at their farm.
Yeah.
All the time. It'd make you crazy. It was like, you know.
Yeah, we can't do that. Yeah.
Anyway, she go. Yeah.
Well, Dakota will do that.
I've seen him land dead stick. I mean, he practices landing dead
stick. The very first landing in the Dakota Hawk was dead stick. It had a Mosler engine, and the Mosler people came and hooked it up, and they wired something wrong.
Oh, yeah.
And it drained the battery so dead it killed the engine. 5 inches of snow on the ground. Gene was a nervous wreck when I sat down, but I put it right in front of his truck. I mean, I was flying the airplane. It's test. You know, I don't know what it's going to do. I'm not going to be out of glide range of this airport.
Are you sure your last name's not Hoover?
No. I am nothing like that. No, nothing like that. But I did used to practice dead stick landings.
Yes.
When I got involved with the ultralights to begin with, I was going around and doing the competitions and stuff like that. One of the events that we always had was a spot landing, and the way you did a spot landing was you went over the spot at 1,000 feet. The prop had to stop. You did a full pattern and spot landing. And I got to where, with several of the different airplanes, I could hit a 2-foot spot within, 95, 96 times out of 100.
Right.
I go to spot landing competitions with the big boys, and they would just tell me, "You can't fly with us."
That's it.
That's cheap.
You always
can't do
win.
that. Yeah. I had one guy. They had a 4-foot square box. We're going to do spot landing, and I said, "How are you going to tell who hits closest to the center?" And the guy told me, he said, "We've been doing this for years. We've never had anybody hit the box. 2 of us hitting the box." He couldn't believe that.
Well,
and we did it dead stick.
You did a spot landing with a gyro one time too, and you won.
Yeah, I did a slow flight with one of them in that.
Is that what it was?
In that 404. I went to a gyro competition. They had a slow flight competition. You come across this line, they start a stopwatch, see who can take the longest to get to the other end. And I had that thing hung up on a prop, had a 503 in a single place. And one of the guys made some statement about that airplane's not going to beat my gyro. He wound up with his rotor in the ground. He won because he didn't ever get there, but he tore his plane. But yeah, we used to go and we'd compete over anything. Did things with it that probably wasn't supposed to be done with it. Never had one of them give me any indication that it wouldn't take what I could dish out, and I really wrung some of them out.
In what way? Like how?
Take them beyond V&E and just haul back on a stick as hard as I could pull it. I got flagged at Sun and Fun one year and accused of doing a vertical takeoff with a 277, and I told them, I said, there's no way that this thing will do that. What I had done, I'd come in at 85 miles an hour in a 70 mile an hour V&E plane, and I did. I pulled it straight vertical for not very long, but got by with it. Yeah,
over the top?
Back over the top.
So if you were if you're talking to people who were interested in purchasing these airplanes, they're overbuilt, they're, you know,
I'll guarantee you they will hold up everything that's advertised on them if they're built properly. You gotta specify that, because I've seen some of them that I wouldn't get in and fly.
Right.
But because they're so lightweight, especially the ultralights, not so much the Dakota Hawk, it's heavier. But you take a 202, it's hard to get 3 Gs on it because it slows down so fast you can't make a transition quick enough.
Right.
Now, if you overload it enough, you might. But with me in it, and I was lighter then, I could do a 90-degree pull-up. I even broke the windshield in a Super Koala at Sun and Fun during a showcase. When we first began to do the showcase, we had a pretty loose rain on us. We were doing...
What's a showcase?
Sun and Fun started it, and they would give each manufacturer 5 minutes out there by himself, show off your airplane, no aerobatics. Well, how do you define no aerobatics when you're at an air show? You know, the definition changes in the air show waiver. It goes to 90 and 90 in most air show waivers that I've ever been in. And that's how I got by with doing a lot of the stuff I did at the air shows. They would have been considered aerobatic if you were just out at your airport. Doing chandelles or doing slow flight, literally hanging it on the prop until you stalled it 100 feet off the ground, you know, and tight turns right down get down in the middle of the runway in a classic or a 404. In a standard runway, make a 360 with your wingtip 6 inches off the ground, you know, 60 degree or 70 degree bank. Just
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, just playing.
Sure.
But it
really helps to hear, you know, this anecdotal evidence of, you know, you did a lot of test flying, you did a lot of, you basically took the airplanes to their limit, and didn't even have to look over.
Yeah, most of it was to my limit.
Right.
It was not the airplane's limit.
Right.
But because of that, you felt very comfortable when you came here, or at least you knew what it would do, and you could just do it.
I kind of had a reputation. Had may not be the right word.
Well, for a long time, they thought he was Mike Fisher.
A lot of people mistook me because my name was Mike.
Right.
And I always had the Fisher tire on.
And he was pushing people toward you all the time.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So if you were to give me some advice, what would it be? In running a company that sells airplanes.
Treat your customers right, and they'll treat you right. That's if you promise a man you're going to get him something, get it to him. If you can't get it to him, tell him so.
Right.
When I was growing up, I worked for a welder at home. I went to work for him when I was 12 years old.
Yep.
Very colorful person. And he built his reputation telling people, if you got to have it Tuesday, take it somewhere else. If you leave it here, I'll have it next Thursday. And Thursday morning, you didn't have to call him. You go get it. If he wasn't going to have it ready then, he told you.
Right.
You didn't go expecting something and not get it.
Right.
And I think that's, you think about Jim Beatties and people like that, you know, and they have made a reputation that has made it hard in any industry, but especially in the airplane industry, to get people to believe what you're telling them. And don't blow smoke at them. If
be honest.
Yeah.
Well, and let the planes be seen.
Put the airplanes in the air. I am a firm believer, and this is just me, If you want to sell an airplane, you need a prospective customer in that airplane when it takes off every time, and let people see it fly with 2 people in it as much as possible. Don't try to beat people to death and charge them $50 to take a ride. Give them a ride. The airplane's going to be out there. You want it to see it. You want them to see it flying. Put somebody in there with him. Don't put a 500-pound guy in there.
No.
But you know, be reasonable about it. Don't always put a 40-pound kid in there either.
No.
They want to see the guy get in it and get out, see what he looks like. They want to see the airplane fly. I didn't ever let them fly it at a show because of all of the traffic and stuff. But I would, if they wanted to know how does it slip,
you'd show them.
I come in at 300 feet. I had one guy one day say, well, you know, I want to know what it flies like. And I said, are you comfortable with the slip? And he said, yeah. I said, you ever done a slip? He said, not like you're going to do if you're going to land there. You know, crank it around. Get you somebody flying it that's comfortable with it and that can fly it.
Sure. Good. Well,
but there's part of that competition. They're going to take that 180 off right there.
We're just going to pause this for a minute.